How do you prepare for a test at school? What do you do to get ready for a soccer game or a baseball game or whatever other kind of sports thing that you might be into? For me, it was hockey and baseball. How do you think, or what do you think it means when we say that God prepares our hearts? In case you haven't noticed, today we're going to be talking about God's preparation in our lives and how God prepares our hearts. It's so good to be with you guys. It's Scott here with IT kidZ. Just so glad to be with you. Hopefully you had a couple of good weeks. The last time that we got together virtually on the video, it was Mother's Day, and it's 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks forward. There's some awesome things that God is doing in our lives. Hey, could you do me a favor? Get those Bibles. God's word is quick, powerful, and sharper than any two-edged sword. And we just love to have you reading with us. In fact, let's take a look at what we're going to be seeing today. Let's take a look at our passages. So for today's Bible passage, let's take a look. We're going to be looking at Acts. We're going to be looking at chapter 16, starting at verses 9 through 15. So that's Acts chapter 16, verses 9 through 15. So let's take a look. You see, God prepares our hearts. And that means that he gets us for whatever he wants to do or teach us in our lives. He gets us ready to hear and to understand his word. You see, he wants us to know all about him and about his love. He wants us to hear his voice and obey him. And he prepares our hearts so that we're ready to know him, hear him, and obey him. Reading the Bible, praying, and worshiping are things that we do that God uses to prepare our hearts. He also uses the circumstances in our lives or the things that we do to prepare our hearts. Nothing happens to us without God knowing about it. He promises to take all things in our lives to make good come out of it. And then we can let his light shine so that everyone will know about Jesus. I'd like us to take a look at a couple of different things that might just absolutely make us go bananas. Here we go. Here's our bananas. Let's start off. Let's take a look. Let's see these green bananas. See these green bananas? They're not ready to eat yet. They're hard on the inside, and they really don't have a whole lot of flavor yet. And it'd even be hard to peel them because they're really not ready to even be opened up yet. They're really not ripe. If we take a look at these black bananas, believe it or not, they used to be a ready-to-eat yellow banana. It might have been left out for too long, or they might have put it in a refrigerator. You see, bananas don't like cold places, so if it was in a refrigerator, it turned black. Either way, they may taste right, but it doesn't look so good. It really just wasn't properly prepared. And then we have this beautiful yellow banana, or yellow bananas, I should say. These bananas are ready right now. It's been prepared under the right conditions. Not too hot, not too cold, not too early, not too late. You see, if we eat these bananas, they're going to taste pretty good. God takes care of our lives and provides the conditions to ripen us the way that these yellow bananas did. He prepares our hearts so that we're ready to hear his word and respond for him the right way. You see, God has prepared you to be here today, right now. And that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. But it could be that you feel like the green or the black banana. And you need to let God's love warm you up and prepare you to worship him with your whole heart, your whole life. You see, God causes things to happen in our lives to prepare our hearts for what he wants to do through us. Sometimes when things happen, we're able to respond in a certain way because he's prepared us for it. Many times we don't even realize until it's over that he was preparing us all along. I know there were a couple times in my life that God prepared me for things that I really was not ready for. See, I didn't want to go through it. And some of it was even back before I was saved, before I gave my heart to Jesus. And the spot that I went to get ready to teach, I had to do some observation in situations that I did not want to be in. But it made me a better teacher. And God oversaw that because he knew what I'd be doing. He knew that I would be working and getting through to some students that maybe other people can't necessarily get through to. And he wanted me to be in that spot. You see, he prepared my heart another time, twice, 2 different times. He brought me into a job that I didn't even apply for. The first time was some 16 or 17 years ago at a high school out in Villa Park, Illinois. I was kind of at the end of my rope. I was trying to find a job. I was applying all these different places and wasn't getting any interviews. And then all of a sudden, you see, God called me into that spot when I was applying for substitute positions and called me into a job that I didn't even apply for as a teacher aide. And that opened up the door. The following year, when I was filling out more teacher applications, after the school year started, I got a call for another job as a teacher that I didn't even apply for. And I'm working there today. He prepared my heart to take those spots that he knew that he wanted me to be in. It is just a wonderful, wonderful thing. Let's take a look at what God does and how he prepares us with his word. Let's take a look here. We're going to look at Acts again, chapter 16, verses 9 through verse 15. Acts chapter 16, verses 9 through 15. During the night, Paul had a vision. He saw a man from Macedonia standing and begging him. Come over to Macedonia, the man said, help us. After Paul had seen the vision, he got ready at once to leave for Macedonia. We decided that God had called us to preach good news there. That we is pretty important. Just a little side note. You see, because up until that spot, it says they came to the border of Mysia. From there, they tried to enter Bithynia, but the Spirit of Jesus would not let them. Right? And so up until that point, the writer is talking about some other group of people. At this point, that writer, who's Luke, the same guy that God used to pen the Gospel of Luke, that same guy he used to write Acts. And you could see here, Luke joins them. He's with them now on this journey. Pretty impressive, pretty cool stuff. So back to verse 11. At Troas, we got into a boat. We sailed straight for Samothrace. The next day we went on to Neapolis. From there we traveled to Philippi, a Roman colony. It is an important city in that part of Macedonia. We stayed there several days. On the Sabbath day, we went outside the city gate. We walked down to the river. There we expected to find a place of prayer. We sat down and began to speak to the women who had gathered together. One of those listening was a woman named Lydia. She was from the city of Thyatira. Her business was selling purple cloth. She was a worshiper of God. The Lord opened her heart to accept Paul's message. She and her family were baptized. Then she invited us to her home. You consider me a believer in the Lord, she asked. If you do, come and stay at my house. She succeeded in getting us to go home with her. Wow, that's pretty impressive. How do you think God prepared people's hearts in this Bible account? If we look at each event, we see that each one was important to the one after it. You see, If Paul had not had his vision and sailed to Philippi, Lydia wouldn't have heard about Jesus and responded the way she did. So the first thing that God did was direct Paul's journey. Then God arranged the events so that Paul and Lydia would meet. Third, God opened Lydia's heart and she responded. Then Lydia responded by believing and becoming baptized. You see, she also responded in thankfulness by inviting Paul and his friends to her home. There she fed them and gave them a place to stay while they were in Philippi. And it's an important note to see a few other things here to understand. Up until this point, if I'm correct, Paul always went to a synagogue first. This is the first time, if I'm right, where Paul doesn't go to a synagogue first to talk with the Jewish people. Second, Paul wouldn't have always gone to go ahead and talk with women first. He would normally, as the custom was, he would have went to talk to men. That was the custom at the time. And so that he went and talked to women, God was preparing his heart. He was preparing him through his direction. There were a lot of phenomenal things here that God did on the heart of Paul to prepare his heart to change what he would normally have done. And it's pretty interesting because later on, you could see God preparing Peter's heart in a story that's up ahead next week. You could see how God prepares Peter's heart through a dream. He uses so many different things. That's phenomenal. You know, Lydia really did two things. She responded by getting baptized and then invited Paul and his friends to her house. She was grateful for what Paul did to her. She wanted to do something for him to show her thankfulness. After that, Paul and Lydia were friends. In fact, so much so that I believe Lydia is mentioned in one of the other letters from Paul. She helped Paul over the years as he preached the gospel, and the church in Philippi grew. Can you take a moment and think of someone that has helped you grow closer to God, the same way that Paul helped Lydia grow closer to God? Maybe it's a parent, a brother, a sister, a friend, a grown-up, or a child. You know, Lydia showed her thankfulness to Paul by inviting him to her home. How could you show your thankfulness to the person who helped you? Maybe it's something like making a card, sending a letter or email, maybe making some cookies, or even just praying for that person. Could you commit to doing that this week? It's so important for us to go ahead and do what God has put on our hearts. And you know what else? It is such a privilege to be able to get together with you each and every week, whether we're doing things in person or whether it's virtually like on this video. In fact, let's take a look at what we have in store for the weeks ahead. Next week, we are going to be in person. We'll be looking at Acts chapter 16, starting off with verses 16 to 34. We'll be looking at Acts 16, verses 16 to 34. And while we won't read all those verses in person, we'll definitely take a look at a few of those key verses, read them out loud in person, and look at that whole passage as we look and prepare for next week's in-person service. In fact, the next 2 weeks are going to be in person, the last week in May and the first week of June. Thank you so much for the privilege of coming into your life virtually this week and with each one of these. And it is a privilege given to me by God to be able to do that with you. And did you know that you see this because of his divine intervention? It's God that has brought us together here through this. And it's a privilege to know you. Thank you so much. We will see you later, everybody. Hopefully you're having a good week. Bye-bye.